guys, what's up? So back in May, I was asked to give a talk about anything related to architectural is political. So I decided to focus on why I decided to do this podcast and to give a little bit about my upbringing and my life, essentially. And the firm is in Oakland, California, Pi Talk. I think I pronounced your name right. They gave me the opportunity to talk about architecture is political, and they gave me the opportunity to have a dialogue with other architects about what I've researched so far, my personal story, and my theories about things. It was such an enriching conversation. I learned a lot, actually. When it ended, I started thinking about it, and especially, I know, even months and months later, listening back on the episode, one thing that carried with me was Carl asked if there's anything worth noting about how we work with market rate developers to infuse some more of community engagement. Essentially what he asked. And my reaction when you first hear it, that was my gut reaction, was I don't think you can. Luxury is luxury, and it should remain that way. I want to elaborate more about that. So the prime example that I give is in other discussions too, if you look online and other presentations, I always give this 2010 census, which the census data is out there, so I can't wait to dive into that. But anyway, back in 2010, I did a comparison of the income levels across the street from Tyler House and this new development. It's $28,000 in Tyler House. I said average median income versus $108,000 across the street. So essentially what Carl is asking is, how can I build a luxury apartment complex serving residents that earn on average $108,000 a year to a community that average income is $28,000 a year? And this is essentially gentrification, right? How does this work? How can we engage the community? Let's think of the approach like this. The community has always been established, right? The community has been that way for a while. You're injecting newness. And this community has been starving for new things. The liquor store hasn't changed. It hasn't had a fresh coat of paint like decades. And pop-up food banks or, check cashing business. I don't know. This community has been starving for newness for a very long time. Like I said before, a fresh coat of paint. And you're building a brand new building. And it's exciting because now you're seeing the community finally look decently, right? Who in the world making six figures want to see a liquor store from where they live? They don't. They want gated communities. They want luxury. The market rate apartment complex that you're putting up, they have amenities like out the wazoo. A gym, a valet, a rooftop deck, a pool, a sauna, whatever. Like, you're putting in amenities for these people. Versus across the street, they have furniture in the lobby that I can't even sit in. True story, actually. You can Google that. So how do you do this? And it's kind of like you have to be realistic about this. Your client bought a property super cheap, and him or her or it, investors, in order for them to have the money to afford to build this building, want to make money. And who cares what the community wants? That's the essence of it. And, not to say that all developers are evil. I'm not saying that at all. Like, I don't know these people. But the reality is that you have people you have residents that aren't interested in the homeless shelter across the street. They want that gone. They don't want to walk and see poor people because they don't feel safe. Like, I have money. I am showing off my money, whether that's a purse, whether that's the stroller, whether that's the shoes on your feet. You have money, and the people across the street don't. And so you're thinking they're going to rob me, and I want them to be removed. I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves about this. And I don't think we are. If you want to make the community better, don't have a stark difference in income. Like, it's like a utopia where we have this idea that we can have mixed incomes, where society is hierarchical. There's a caste system. I've been to California maybe twice in my life. And there are certain sections in California that you can't go to. It's a gated community. It's gated for a reason. They don't want poor people coming in their community. They don't want to see the homelessness. They don't want to see how the majority lives. They don't want to see it. And that's the honest truth. They want to feel safe. And the only way you feel safe is by people within your income bracket who can afford a Tesla and not take public transportation. Although it is DC, the new thing now is you should walk everywhere or bike everywhere or use a scooter, whatever. But you do have a Tesla in the garage and do whatever you want on the countryside, whatever. I don't think that there is it's gentrification. That's exactly what it is. And last time I checked, which was like a decade ago, I don't know if this changed or not, whether property values and taxes are related. Because if you have a $900,000 home with DC taxes, like, can you really afford? Or, your property value went up to $900K or something. Yeah. So I was really thinking about that and whether we have a solution to that or not, and can we have a solution to that? And I'm just going off of some, whether you want to call it common sense or not, but to me is common sense, or like a relatability thing, or like whatever. I don't have any research that proves it, other than I'm taking census data and like this human behavior and what we've done in the past and what this country has done in the past. I mean, basically the whole world basically does this too. You don't want to be with people that aren't like you because it's uncomfortable. You don't want to be the odd person out. It's high school all over again. If you're the cool kid, you don't want to be with the not cool kid. If you're the awkward kid, you kind of want to be with the cool kid, but you're awkward, so you're going to hang with the other awkward people. Yeah, it's the same thing. Oh, I want to make some corrections, please. So I said that Tyler House is 12 stories. Tyler House is not 12 stories. It is 8 stories. I was going off of memory, and in my mind, things were bigger than it actually is. So it's an 8-story building, and it varies in like sizes. It steps down to maybe 6 stories and stuff. It's really cool. At some point in time, I'll do like a proper elevation and a proper floor plan so everybody could see the proportions and everything. But I just haven't. I went down there actually with my mom, and we walked around the neighborhood, and I took some photographs, and it was good to talk with my mom, and we reminisced and everything, and it was a good thing. Things look smaller than what I remembered it. The new development is coming up. They're further along than when we first walked over there, but the concrete is poured and a couple of stories are already up. I guess I'll save this for a new presentation whenever it comes up again. My new discoveries about it. But yeah, I have some episodes that that are still like waiting to be edited, and I have some exciting ones that are coming up. So the reason why I haven't been posting as often or as I frequently is there's a lot of stuff going on, and I can't wait to tell you after it's been submitted. Oh, should I even tell you about that? Yeah, okay. There's a lot of things that's going on that's life related, so that's why I haven't been able to focus on the podcast. So this episode you will have to use your imagination, okay? Because I was presenting slides. This was all over Zoom, of course. So I was presenting slides. So I give a lot of direction. I say on your left and on your right, this arrow and that arrow. So that's just me giving direction to it. And you're like, what is she looking at? What are you looking at? I thought about posting it online, but there's a lot of things that I edited out, a lot of like personal conversations that I'm not ready to share with the entire world yet. So when I was looking at the video, it felt kind of choppy. So I can't release the whole video. I may do some snippets or something, but I found a creative way so far presenting it, and that should be ready within like a couple of weeks or so. It's taken a little bit longer than I anticipate, but I'm trying something new and you'll see it soon. I'll post it on Instagram and Twitter and then on my website, so you get it through there. If you subscribe on my website, you should get a notification that it's been posted. Again, only clarification is Tower Houses 8 stories, not 12 stories, and I give a lot of direction, like left, right, arrow, and that's because I am directing people to images. So that's what that means. But thanks for listening. All right, here you go.
So thanks everyone for hopping on to our Thursday Skull session. We're very happy to have Melissa Daniel here with us today, all the way from Maryland. We heard about Melissa from Adrian, and maybe Adrian, you can say something as well, but Melissa is the creator and host of the Architecture is Political podcast, and so I'm sure we're going to hear all about that. And she's also very involved with the AIA and won the 2018 Associates Award. And is involved in the housing committee, and I think that's where she crossed paths with Adrian. And so going to hear about some of her work and activism and podcast. Yeah, anything to chime in on, Adrian?
The only thing I was going to say is that I think, Melissa, I had known of you before we were on the committee together. And so I was excited to join the committee, and I'm glad that you're able to share your perspective with the group today.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for having me here. I decided to take a different approach to this, so I hope you enjoy it. It's all about me today with a little bit of architecty going on. Y'all can see that. I'm just going to reduce it a little bit so you can get that. Okay. So again, my approach to this discussion is both as an end user and participant in designing for a healthy community. I'm framing this story as not as a case study. It's about my perspective. I started a podcast called Architecture is Political as an exploration of how I grew up, the built environment that dictated my experiences and the people I met along my journeys through architecture. As an end user, I am a product of urban renewal. Northwest One, the area that I grew up in, is an urban renewal project in Washington, D.C., which started in the late 60s and continues on to this day. My neighborhood, this is what I remember. The Revision Cloud is where Tower House is. Across the street from Tower House was Big Ben, and it's a liquor store. At the bottom left, that's Sursum Quarter. And then to the lower right, that's Mount Airy Baptist Church. So I just want to make a note about that little tiny church. You see there's a little tree there to the left of it. That's where Sursum Quarter ends. So that corner, so if you look at the square at the corner, that's where Sursum Quarter ends. So just keep that in mind in the story. Just go forward. All right, so my neighbor's changing. I've enlarged this map a little bit so you can get a little bit more of a reference. Again, with the revision bubble, upper middle, I guess, that is Tower House. And here I provided a picture of Tower House. This is how it looks like currently. To Big Ben, I haven't been down there in a while, so I wasn't able to take any pictures of it. I need to do that. To the bottom left, that's the new Sursum Quarter. It's not called that anymore. It's been torn down, and this is a rendering of the new development. And then to your right, again with the church, you see the relationship of the new development in comparison to what it was. So again, with the orientation, that red line in the middle, that's North Capitol Street. And that diagonal line above it, that's New York Avenue. So Tyler House sits on the corner of New York Avenue and North Capitol Street. The revision cloud at the bottom, that's the US State Capitol. So Tyler House is north of the Capitol, North Capitol Street. So really quickly, I just want to give you a brief history of Tyler House. I'm going to direct you to the woman in the middle. The architect for Tyler House is Clotilde Woodard Smith. According to Wikipedia, Clotilde Woodard Smith, FAIA, was an American modernist architect and urban planner whose career was centered in Washington, D.C. She was the sixth woman inaugurated in the AIA College of Fellows, and at the peak of her practice, she led the country's largest women-owned architectural firm. Southwest Waterfront, now known as the Wharf, was among the first urban renewals Clotilde was known for. So in the middle, again, the model that she's pointing to, that is the Southwest Waterfront. The Southwest urban redevelopment came under scrutiny because it used eminent domain to displace residents. To the left, that is a model of Tyler House. And to give you some perspective, again, there's an orange arrow pointing into a direction off the screen. If you go to your right, that is my oldest sister. And that's like the first floor apartment inside Tyler House. So this was in the 1970s. So yeah, changing neighborhood throughout one's life. Things change. That's one thing that life guarantees, right? But I want to show you how rapidly my neighborhood changed, how architecture played a role, and how it affected me as a human being. All right, so more maps. Starting to the right, notice again, here's orientation. The red line in the middle, that is North Capitol Street. The diagonal line, again, that is New York Avenue, is the yellow line. Again, intersection of New York Avenue and North Capitol Street. The green building, that is Tyler House. Okay, to the left, that colorful map, that is the 2010 census. The orange block, it's kind of hard to see here, but you know, the corner of where Tyler House is. I tried to draw a little orange triangle to the right. But anyway, that little orange area, the average median income in 2010 was $29,000. The blue area, average median income is $108,000. So, economically, this is what gentrification looks like. You have a higher income group moving into a lower income area, altering the culture and financial landscape of the original neighborhood. The neighborhood I grew up in is now unrecognizable, and this is just an example of economic segregation. Again, here's a physical view of this. This is a street view. To the top, I'm on North Capitol Street. Left, that is Tyler House. So 2007, that's how it looked. In the middle is probably 2012 or something, 2013, and then finally 2019. At the bottom here, this is Patterson Street. So if we go in, can I draw? Well, no, I don't think I can. So Patterson Street is like, there you go, like right there. And again, it's they even removed the do not enter sign. There's a tree there. Okay, you get the point. This is how I struggled with architecture with these images here. This on M Street. So this time I put a little map at the bottom. Again, the revision cloud is Tyler House. The square is Sursum Quarter. I have blue arrows and I have orange arrows. The top part, blue arrows, 2009 to 2019. To your left, again, that is Tyler House, and to your right in these images are Sursum Corda. A little bit about Sursum Corda is a Latin expression meaning lift up your hearts. The original plan called for 155 units. It had cul-de-sacs. It was a plant community, obviously. Interesting to note that a group of nuns from the Religious Institute of the Religious of the Sacred Heart were among the first residents, aiming to support and minister to new residents. The developer of Sursum Corda, his name was Eugene Stewart. He was a lawyer at Georgetown University. he was an alumnus, and he had this idea of, this is how I want to help low income people, poor people. He asked his alumnus of Georgetown if they would be willing to sponsor or help financially or just give time to the people of Simpson Quarter. Low income housing, affordable housing has been done already. This is not new. Simpson Quarter was built in 1968. Helping the poor, mentoring poor Black and Brown, it's been done before. And when you look at these images, those efforts, those ideas, the designs are gone. Looking down at the bottom, the orange arrow, you're not even in the same place. I don't even recognize it when I go down here anymore. And this is just a span of 10 years of how rapidly the change has come. I want to talk a little bit about displacement of people. And I'm focusing on Simpson Quarter, but I've experienced displacement myself, but for totally different reasons. Yeah, drugs and violence were definitely a part of growing up in this neighborhood. Music became a platform for many artists, including this one here to your left. Simpson Quarter proved as a backdrop for this music video about life there. But the way the government wants to tackle drugs and violence and in policies is the complete removal, the relocation of the undesirables instead of correcting failed policies. There's culture there. And, not to say that drugs or violence is a part of culture, no, but a community was formed. And by displacement, you're eliminating that community. All right, now about me. This is Tower House to your left, and then to your right, again with the orange arrow, is where I used to live on the 3rd floor. And this is me as a kid. I want to talk a little bit about the balcony. The balcony became fear and anxiety for me. My mom never used to let me play outside. So the balcony became the only outdoor source. There was not much room to play. The balcony became like an outdoor storage at times with, you put the bike out there. It became summer vacation homes for the indoor plants. It's where I played in the snow. It's where I sit outside when the AC wasn't working. But as I grew older, that connection to the outside world, with that neighborhood, with that apartment, I grew fear and anxiety over it. So the image to your right, that's water damage. It came from the apartment above. Again, we were on the 3rd floor. Keep that in mind. So this is how displacement happened. It was in the form of hazardous material. So asbestos was in those walls. So if you don't know what asbestos is, let me just remind you real quick. Exposure to asbestos can cause scarring of the lungs and abdominal tissue, difficulty breathing, and can be a source of diseases such as lung cancer and mesothelioma. Unfortunately, it was in Tyler House. So, okay, this image and what happened. Asbestos was found, and the game plan was to do it in phasing. So again, there's 12 stories and they decided to section off. So the first inkling of displacement was the 12th floor to the 8th floor. They moved people out and they started doing the abatement process. During one winter, in order to save money, they decided to cut the heat on those floors, which caused pipes to burst. Water started trickling down and people had to evacuate immediately. It was as if there was a fire. So you would come home and your door would be boarded up. And you're like, my stuff is in there. My kids' stuff is in there. And they give you money, but it's your stuff. And this is where I lived in fear. Now, these photos were taken prior to knowing all of this. We were complaining about water damage coming into the unit, and that's when my mom took the photos, and then all this stuff happened. I thought I was going to lose everything. And I think the anticipation was like the worst thing ever. All right, moving on still with the balcony. It also became a source of entertainment. Someone got shot And crime was high in DC back in the day. It was once known as the murder capital of the US. This was one of those instances where political figures would come. And so again, with the orange arrow, that guy was the DC mayor. Mayor for life, Marion Barry. He was a civil rights leader. He had a master's in organic chemistry. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, he was instrumental in hiring African-American architects. The Reeve Center is a DC municipal building, was designed by a Black architect that I had a pleasure who introduced me to architecture, but that's another story. So the poster on the left was taken at a housing project I worked on a couple of years ago. And it shows that the Black community still loves the video or image, I should say, on the right. That is from a 1990s TV show called In Living Color. They made a parody of Marion Barry along with this other character name of Arsenio Hall. At the bottom in the green, just to give you a flavor of the type of guy he is, when he was being arrested in a hotel room for possession of crack cocaine, I think it was. And when the words you see there was one of the infamous words that he said. I have a picture of that, actually, that exact same one somewhere. I bought it. So why am I in this game? Why am I pursuing architecture? And for me, asking this question was the reason why I started this podcast. I was fortunate enough to live in a city that had Black architects, and they did cool stuff. So this is a model of the African American Museum, which was displayed at the Smithsonian, and they had a competition for this museum. And so, I didn't know that this was going to be the winning one, but I took a picture of it because I thought it was cool. Sorry. And then I was also fortunate enough to go on a construction tour for the African American Museum. I knew somebody who knew somebody, and I got a tour of it. I was super excited about that. And then again, I knew somebody who knew somebody, and I got a construction tour of the MLK Memorial. And I knew somebody who lived in Baltimore, and this was during the Freddie Gray incident, and I got to hear Prince live. I just threw that in there because I thought it was cool, and everybody should know that I saw Prince. So all this to say that architecture is political. It's a podcast that has become my therapy. And I hope someday I will find my superpower and to use it for the good of architecture and to let others know that Black and brown folks do talk about architecture. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Was that like a bunch of podcasts, or is that have you used that material in several different podcasts? It seems like there's a lot there.
No, you're my test subjects. So no, I haven't. It's not on any podcast until now.
It is pretty dramatic in the pictures where it's just leveled, flat, open land from like big buildings.
I was just looking on Google Maps. You can still see some of the buildings that have been torn down are still there on Street View. And it looks like the NPR headquarters is right across the street.
Yes, it's literally across the street. That street, North Capitol Street, is an interesting dynamic because you also have DC Housing Authority is there. You have NPR that moved in. There is a fancy veterans homeless shelter there. Gonzaga College, high school college is there. And during my research, it's just amazing how much God is around in that neighborhood. I kept emphasizing Mount Airy Baptist Church. Mount Airy Baptist Church was the developer. They were the ones that took out a loan. HUD had a loan back in the day, and they took out the loan. And Tyler was actually a reverend there. So Reverend Earl Tyler or Pastor Earl Tyler. So part of my research is to find out how this dynamic worked. So it's a Baptist church, so it's a Black church. And then you had a female architect. And I'm wondering, how was that dynamic? Because when I researched Clotilde, she was not as progressive as we all would want her to be. So I would love to hear that story of how that happened, like how at the table, like how did that happen? Another thing that I want to do is compare. A lot of Southwest that she designed has been preserved. And when I brought up, hey, Tower House was designed by this woman too, nobody knew. It was like this worst or best kept secret. And sad to say, a lot of the things that she implemented in are now gone. Like the balconies, for example, they closed it off. It was during that time, parking was a thing. Like you could park, like they build 4 cars. They also built for large families. So beneath me was a 2-story apartment. And that was all throughout in Tower House. So, I also want to look at plans and some concept sketches, but due to the pandemic, I can't do any of that stuff.
So you've been kind of gathering this research on this place, your neighborhood, and kind of trying to understand the story. You did a great job of kind of setting it up.
Yeah, Melissa, that was bringing up for me, is there a way to influence without, sharing something you don't want to share? Is there a way to influence the direction of design and the social outcomes of design without sharing something you don't want to share?
I think this is the way life is. You want to do a protest, but you don't want to get in trouble. It's kind of like, you want to save that tree, but are you willing to chain yourself to the tree? Are you willing to get arrested? How far will you go? I've never called myself an activist, even with the whole BLM is this happening. I am not that person outside marching. That's not me. I don't want to get pepper sprayed. I don't want to get beaten by anybody. Like I hate confrontation. I really have to be pissed off to be confrontational, but to put myself out there, no, I can't. I know who I am as a human, and I was not built for that.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't trying to put it on you specifically, but to say, is there a way for a person somewhere to do that? And maybe that's not even a fair question because we can't know other people's perspectives that closely.
I can address that comment if you don't mind.
I meant to call out your hand, Marcial. Go ahead.
Thanks, Melissa. It's really neat seeing your slides and sort of the neighborhood. But, I can tell you a little story. A long time ago, I lived in a neighborhood in San Francisco, the Outer Sunset, when I was renting at the time. And there was a development that was happening, and all the neighbors got together and organized, and they were like against it. And one of the neighbors, these were homeowners, right? And they came up to me, they knew I was an architect, and they asked me to join them and kind of protest against the development. And I didn't want to be out there. I was just like, yeah, I don't want to, I wasn't personally that compassionate against it like that. But I said to them, you know what I can do? I'm not going to be the mouthpiece for you guys, but what I can do, I can lend my expertise and review the drawings or review the design and give you my opinion and the background, right? And educate them. And that's what I did. I did some research. I looked at the drawings of the design. I gave them my critical review of what was going on. A sort of like a consultant would do, right? You give them the information and let them use that information to go out there and advocate for what they want, And I found some stuff that wasn't really working, that building had some issues design-wise, and that's what I was able to do. So sometimes there is a way to advocate and be in the background, because as architects, we are considered, in a way, technocrats, but we are professionals, and we have a subject matter that we know, and you can provide that expertise, to somebody else to then be that mouthpiece. And it seems like with the research you've done, you have a lot of information that you can share, which is great.
Thank you for that. And you're right. It's kind of like you can be a lawyer, or I can use the architectural knowledge that I have to help. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
See, Kevin has his hand up.
I was really struck by your discussion on the balcony. That's the most I've ever thought of a balcony in like a short period of time. It just triggered all these thoughts about, especially with COVID, right? And how little space we had, or a lot of people had, with shelter in place, right? You're like, oh, here's my little postage stamp. And it just made me think about what your thoughts are about, not just, because one of the things that in school for me, I went to architecture school thinking about the buildings, and then I came out thinking about the whole thing, the streets, the landscape, the relationship to the environment, and you do those urban walking tours and stuff like that. And so I was just kind of wondering your thoughts on your relationship to the environment and how the advocacy part of it is an interesting part in terms of open space and what is this minimum amount that's humane for people. Because, it's just, and what's the relationship? Because like a balcony is one thing versus a front stoop is another. And your relationship to your neighbors is totally a different thing when you're up high versus on the street. So some thoughts I had. I don't know what your reaction is to that, but
no. When I was thinking about that balcony piece and I had all these photographs of balcony, I was like, okay, I could turn this into a story. It kind of reminded me of how in multifamily, how we got rid of the balcony. And then we kind of like half-assed the balcony by not having it out. Like, we're going to just fake we're going to have a balcony, right? We're going to open the screen and look down. Like,
the Juliet balcony. We talk about
that's what it's called.
The fake. Yeah. We have those debates.
No. It's just like these cycles. And what was the reason for them to close it off? And I think about how ugly balconies have looked. You kind of walk by, you see, again, all this crap on balconies. So what's the best way of doing that is getting rid of balconies. And it's real estate, right? That's the thing too, in terms of numbers, is real estate. There are two worlds. There's architect, you wear an architect hat and you throw in your architectural theory practice BS on and you analyze, but then there's real people who are experiencing these things, and the things that we theorize totally goes out the window because people don't think in theory. And it's kind of hard. It's been hard for me to juggle because then I come in these spaces full of architects who know a lot more things than I know, that jargon, versus the community. And I have to watch my vernacular. I can't speak archy speak. I have to think about what I'm saying. I took that approach of, I'm just going to talk to you the way I'm going to talk to you. And that was hard for me to do. Even at work, it was extremely hard for me to be me. Thank you for that though, Kevin.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you for showing up that way and doing that. It's really refreshing, as well as thank you for your presentation and sharing your story a bit and your research. I wanted to come back up to this conversation that, Adrian and you and KJ a little bit were having around the title of your podcast being Architecture is Political. Is there a role that we can play as like people in power of firms and working on these projects when there's projects that we're maybe less in favor of?
I think it comes down to leadership. I have two quick stories. Hopefully they're quick. One story, through Instagram, someone had linked me to Indiana Avenue. You'll hear it because it'll be in the upcoming podcast. Anyway, my point is that a developer bought Madam C.J. Walker's plant and was going to convert it into a multifamily. And the community was in an uproar. And so they didn't like the plans, they didn't like the drawings. So there was this other architect that came around and he was an advocate, something similar to what that other gentleman said. My screen is limited. Is that it? I'm sorry.
I think I may have found it. It's in Indianapolis.
Yes.
Madam C.J. Walker building.
Yes. So they found another architect and he was able to fix that. So when I called the lady up, I got in contact with her. I was like, hey, can you be on my podcast? Because I wanted that perspective of not the architect and tell me the story, but from the community part. And in me like pressuring her, so what do you think of architects? Were you mad? Like, how do you feel about it? And she was like, no, they actually helped me. Like, and so she was really appreciative of that. So I guess that's one story. The other story is this came about today. And if you follow me on Twitter, either my name or Arcus Poly name, you'll see the thread. But there was Tulsa, Oklahoma, the massacre that happened back in the early 1900s, like 1912 or something. They are finally like building a memorial or something. So there was an RFP from the city of Tulsa that came out, and they hired an architecture firm. Well, their architecture firm is all white. And so here you have a massacre that happened and you hired an all white firm to do the designs. Are they the villain in this story? They do have a DEI scholarship. So are they the villain in this story? Why could they not hire minorities? What was their struggle? Or because there are Black people in Tulsa or in Oklahoma, or like, we do exist. What's the thought process behind that? But I guess to my point is, it depends on the leadership. It was dependent on the architect, the principal, or it could be an individual, I don't know, back in Indiana, the other individual architect, or he could be a sole practitioner, or he could be a principal of the firm or work for a firm, I don't know. And then of course the whole Tulsa, Oklahoma, that memorial that they're building, that architecture firm, that leadership, they obviously want to serve the community, but maybe they weren't taught how. I don't know. To answer your question again, it's all about leadership. Hope I didn't go all the way around.
That was great. Thank you.
Your story of the Adam C.J. Walker building and almost the community's response to the architect. It does some community meetings that I've been on for our projects where community members maybe have strong feelings or up an arm against a building, and they're maybe more confrontational to the developer, but then they'll turn to us and the architects and they'll be like, oh, well, you're just doing your job. And in some ways it's like, it's nice that they realize that, but also we are, in the room, talking to the developer, part of the conversation. And some people seem to like hold architects in these lights or kind of in a higher position, kind of separate from the problem where we're can be right in it. And I like the specificity of your stories. It's, you're talking about a very specific place to you, but there's projects in San Francisco and in Oakland that maybe could draw some similarities, and kind of all seeing the effects of gentrification around us. And it's nice to kind of, not nice, but interesting to learn about a different part of the world and kind of hear your experiences and lessons that you've been learning and the research you've been having.
That's kind of interesting too. Like I've always felt personally responsible for gentrification, and the fact that I don't, do I think differently? Like, because we're the ones that are designing how these buildings look. Like, we're literally creating the blueprint for how this looks, but the community doesn't really hold us responsible for it. And a lot of architects would agree that, no, you shouldn't hold us responsible because we're like the last piece in the whole scheme of trying to get this building built. I think our construction cost is like minimal. And something else, another aha moment I had the other day was I was on Clubhouse listening, and we are at the beginning, we're not at the end. So the real estate agent is making money off of like the retail value, and we got the wholesale cost for it, like in terms of money wise, but yet we are the most important piece in the whole thing. Our designs drive the market value. Like if it's a crappy design, then it wouldn't go as high as a high-end one. And again, it's the aesthetics. And to me, I don't think it would be such an uproar if we pause for a second and think about how the community looks and how we can incorporate the community more fully. I think that we just don't have time to pause to think about how we are designing, because it's time. Like, you don't have time. You don't have time.
Yeah, that's such a big and important point. Kevin, your hands up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of reminds me though, like back in school, I did a paper on architectural history paper on Armenian architecture and identity. And I was kind of lucky, I think, to get an award for it. And that really kind of triggered something. It made me think of like, well, thinking of like the symbolism and just certain things that were done in the architecture to kind of stand out and be different and not be assimilated in a certain way by invading neighbors, the Romans, the Persians. I mean, just like it was invaded several times by different places. So it made me think of projects that my old office had done in the Bayview, and they talked about Afrocentric design, and they started like bringing in all these like symbols and things, but it made me like wonder whether or not some of it was, I don't know, like it was deeper than paint, right? It was more than just paint. Sometimes it was, because that's all that you could afford. You could change the paint, but some things were like stamped in the concrete, or they were done in a way that was thoughtful. But it just made me wonder, like what symbols or what things start to become relevant or resonate for different groups, right? Like it's kind of trying to find those things, and then really have it talk more than just paint. You know what I mean?
It's kind of like, what is modern architecture? And it could be defined as minimalism. And that when we go, there was this, what's that book? It's by Adolf Lowe. Is it Lowe? Yes, that book.
The Ornament and Crime book?
Right. And how, if you look at other cultures, ornamental, I don't know the right word for that, is like the definition of their culture. So when architecture and minimalism is like the new thing, straight lines, just smooth, all that stuff gets away from that. So you just have this blank slate.
Right. It doesn't tell a story in a way that it could. And it's like, it's a little bit of postmodernism is the kind of the result of it goes in a way that looks dated or not. I don't know. It just becomes a thing. But then you look at like there are symbols, or there are things in the African American History Museum is different. It's not classical architecture, and you think of like everything in DC, there were, when our former wonderful, and I'm being sarcastic, president said that all architecture should be classical. All federal architecture needs to be classical from now on. That's just the most ridiculous like statement ever, right? Because then you could never build anything like that, right? Because they're totally different in form and expression, right, than classical architecture. So just looking at that one museum is such a juxtaposition to like anything else.
Are we designing for a specific culture, or are we designing for a melting pot, right? Like that's the whole end goal of everything, minus the whole fight that we've been fighting for and still fight for. The ultimate thing is, I don't want to be a Black architect. I don't want to be a female architect. I just want to be an architect. But in order for that to happen, a lot of other things need to happen. So in this utopia where everything is, we're all equal, equitable, diverse, what does that look like architecturally? You still have your heritage. Like there's no way you can take away that. You're still Irish, you're still Italian, you're still your lineage. So you have that, but you're also American. So how do you define that? And then in certain areas, you have higher concentration of certain things. You want to walk into that area and you're still American, but you're integrated. Does that make sense? What does architecture look like? It's not just postmodernism. It can't just be that. Although it is part of it, but it's not all that. And I feel that the US is like, the architecture sucks now because it all looks the same. It's like every other place is a Walmart, or a Target. Like it all looks the same.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I'm on Google Maps and looking at Tyler House, a little bit, and you kind of said something about that architect you were chatting with, that the building they were designing could have just been plopped down anywhere. I'm looking at Tyler House, and maybe I'm just looking on Google Maps, so who knows what it's like in person. It reminds me a lot of housing projects that were built in the same era in the 60s around Boston, and from, in this building, look like it could be picked up and plopped in Oakland or San Francisco. But you said it, you had a neighborhood there was culture in that place. Maybe we as architects overemphasize the power of architecture. Some of these buildings may not be embedded with culture in their facade, but it's the people that make it up that can be so much more important. And that doesn't mean we can't try to embed culture in architecture, but I wonder if we think about it too much.
I agree with you, KJ, because in light of gentrification, because in my mind, gentrification is an economic issue. An architectural, style, although very important for many other reasons, isn't necessarily an economic issue. Displacement for example, if there are economic policies in place to prevent displacement, it doesn't matter what new building gets built or what it looks like if you can maintain, keep displacement from happening, right? Rent control, changing laws to allow better home ownership for minorities. If you can keep the population there and then they don't get displaced, but then things are built new, is that gentrification? Just the act of building new, So I think in my mind, gentrification is less about architecture, more about economic policies.
It's interesting, KG, you mentioned that you're from Boston, and I went to Boston last time I've been there was maybe 2016, 2017. And I went to school there, went to Wentworth, and I lived there for like 4 or 5 years.
I went to Wentworth. So wow, what a small world. We can talk about that later. Go Leopards.
I know.
You say leopards or lepers?
Leopards.
Leopard.
See, you're all just being hoity-toity now because I went to the BAC. We were in the trenches.
Nope.
Yeah, but they're making it one, Adrian. They're making it one. I was
They
envious of
purposely-
Wes. You poked the bear. Like, hey, wait a minute.
So, but I guess my point is I graduated in 2005. And when I went back like 10 plus years later, nothing's changed. Like Huntington Ave is still Huntington Ave and Newberry Street is still Newberry Street. I went down to the blue where City Hall is, State Street. And there was downtown crossing. That's where I was, downtown crossing. And there was a new building going up. And, it was enough to notice that there was new construction, but it still looked like the areas of what I know. DC, you don't even know what street you're on. And you're looking back and forth. Mind you, like DC has a height limit. And for example, H Street, it's for 2, maybe 3 stories max, and maybe like a 5-story at that one government place. Now it's like planning and policy. Yeah, that is a huge thing. But it's the way it looks. Like comparing down to downtown crossing, it was another high-rise building that was going up. So they replaced or maybe it was adjacent to a high-rise. The scale was appropriate. There's no scale at all. You have a single family, and then you have a 5-story, and then you have a 2-story, and then a ranch style. There's just like this weird. It's all about maximizing space. It's all about profit. I hear what you're saying, how it is largely economics. But again, the way it looks, that's on us, right?
Yeah, and it seems like you're talking about, when you're talking about scale, also maybe like the form of the building, and that can be dictated a lot by the pro forma and whatnot. But it's also, we have a lot of control over the form and the scale. And that's really important.
Yeah, and channeling Mike here, he would argue that a big classy tower doesn't look the most inviting to somebody who can't afford that down payment or that rent. And that includes a lot of folks, not just people necessarily at the lower end of the scale, but even in the middle. They might go, I can't go into that building. That's very exclusive, right? So the architecture does, in its craft and its expression, can definitely say a lot, right? If it's the Four Seasons, you're not going there unless you feel like you can afford it, right? It's not just the ornament. I'm just thinking there's a impression that you definitely make with all those things.
Where is Mike? I feel like this is exactly his cup of tea.
The economic part too, just to I don't know, maybe just put that thought in everybody's mind, is that you see these neighborhoods gentrifying, like in Florida, for instance, like Little Haiti, like some of those neighborhoods, they're gentrifying because of climate, and that's an economic and a spatial and a sea level issue, right? And it's not so much about the architecture, but there's an economic, and there's something going on there, right, with supply and demand and all those things. And so and then the physical aspects, obviously, of gentrification is all these, the freeways that have kind of cut up these neighborhoods. And having lived in West Oakland, like I know that some of those things, the environmental things that you're exposed to are, detractors that kind of push people away. So anyway.
I know we are past, 6 o'clock here, 9 o'clock, where you are, Melissa. But I think we have a couple more questions if you think that would be okay, and then we could wrap things up.
I feel like I'm among family now, so.
I think Dylan had a question, and then Carl.
Yeah, a question or comment or something for you to respond to, Melissa. I was thinking about this discussion of how important like the style or different aspects of the physical form of a building is in terms of being, well, a good place, or in terms of being inclusive, more equitable, I guess, and or both. And it seems, and like, what control do we maybe have? And there is the issue of, like, on the one hand, like, seems like, yeah, you can have perhaps an ugly place and it can still end up having culture that forms and is associated with it. But maybe there would have been better opportunities if it were a differently designed place. And like, it does, like like how a place looks does affect how you feel, but then different people feel differently based on different forms. So I think that's probably important to keep in mind. And it goes to what you were saying, Melissa, about including who lives in the area around it, or what community it's going. And the other thing is, well, sort of aside from like the actual aesthetic, I think the other thing that we can do as architects is think about kind of other aspects about the way a space is designed. And to some degree, we have limitations on this too, but we can advocate one way or another. Like what you were talking about Tyler House having balconies originally and having units for larger families. And so those kinds of things, especially in housing, we have the specific layout of a unit is something that sometimes it's highly influenced by client desires, but it's something, it seems like, that we can think about a lot, and it's potentially a place that we could like make places better by thinking about. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on any.
This is not an easy solution. I think, Dylan, you've expressed it very well, that how complex this is, because I know for me, I'm very heightened. Like all of a sudden, I'm just like, I listen very attentively about things, and I read things, and I'm like, I have to stop and I have to do my research before I say anything online. Like, I was just like, oh, you're being, whatever derogatory term I can think of or use, but I have to stop, do my research first before I even say it. Because of my heightenedness, everybody's like that right now. And it feels that the next new building going on this block, we calling it out as gentrification. I always mention social media because I'm like heavily involved in it. I'm a consumer of social media. And it was this TikTok, and the TikTok person was in Brooklyn, and he showed a building that's going up and said, this is gentrification. It's a new building that's just going up. Is it really? We don't know. You have to do your research and find out and figure things out. Because we're so heightened and so like on guard and just ready to fight, it's hard to distinguish good design from, I don't want to say bad design, but with ill intentions. So this is not an easy solution. I wished and this is part of like the podcast, is a part of like when I'm talking about what I'm doing, is trying to figure this out. A good resource though I've come across is blackspaces.org, and they have this manifesto, and I'm in love with this manifesto, and it was written by Black women and other. This manifesto is for the beginnings. This is how you would engage a community when you're about to design it. I haven't obviously used it because that's not in my arena, but when I read through it, it made total sense. It was total logical to me. It could be a bunch of BS, but when I read it, it made sense to me. Were you guys able to find it?
I may have. I just posted it in the chat. You let me know if this is it. But Carl, do you want to?
Yep, that's it.
Great. Did you still have a question or comment or thought, Carl, to close us out?
Well, yeah, I did. It has to do with like what we as architectural professionals, what capacity we have to influence the built environment. And I know like PyTalk as a, as a firm of values, and we have a lot more opportunities to maybe explore those in affordable housing, but we also have market rate projects. I'm curious if there's anything worth noting about how we work with market rate developers to infuse some more community sensitive qualities into our designs.
I don't think you can, because it's a different subset. You're building a building to make money. That's it. It's a luxury building. And it should remain that way. I don't think that there should be 4 acres of luxury buildings, but I think to appreciate that you can do both, or you can mix it up or whatever. But I think the last thing you want to do is lie to yourself saying that this luxury buildings is for poor people, or here we call it ADUs, affordable dwelling units. I don't know if you have that there. Yeah, you do. Okay. So if you have that as part of your luxury thing, then all I ask is don't let it be, let all the finishes be the same, and don't stick people in the loading dock area, like stuff like that. I've witnessed that, and it's infuriating. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, Melissa, when we distribute its inclusionary units here, if it gets built within the same building, but it's, they get the same kind of views that anybody else gets. They're on all the different floors. They get north views, they get south views, they get east views, west views. They get all the same finishes. There's no difference in any of the units. But I think where Carl was trying to go with it is I think actually kind of pushing on the economic side of it. Okay, how do we, should we, these are maybe questions for ourselves to answer and not you, influence the economic result by the way that we design, and be more representative of the neighborhood in which we're, because we've the building so that it feels more, and have used materials so that it is more like the things that are there and familiar and recognizable to the existing community, that it can't be anywhere, that it actually does feel like it belongs in that neighborhood of that town or that city. We definitely try to do that, and I think it's for ourselves and others to judge how successful we are.
The one thing too is architects talk to other architects, but we don't, like, who criticizes you, right? Who critiques you? Like Carl, who critiques you? Like who?
Yeah.
You can't ask your workers to do it, because they're gonna lie to your face because they want to keep their job. But I mean, who can honestly say that, that design you did is shit? I don't know what y'all were thinking. Like, who does that? No, we don't have that. We don't have that at all. We don't.
Sometimes your friends will, your friends that aren't architects.
Yeah, but I mean, how much power does that have in the company? I mean, that's individual wise, right? Like, I really think that we should, I don't know how. Hell, I don't know.
Oh, sorry, Melissa. We talked a little bit about incorporating post-occupancy evaluations, and again, that's another tool I think that's more appropriate or more doable for our affordable or nonprofit clients. But, this is just a concept. I feel like I've been hearing about this for years and years, and it's like a check on the performance of design. The crux is like who's gonna sponsor this phase of a project.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been great chatting with you. It's nice to I don't bump into many Wentworth alumni, so
we're the wit in the mitt, right?
Yeah, and hopefully keep in touch and let us know if you're ever in Oakland and if we're ever back in the office.
First, I'm on a plane.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for having me.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, good talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And everyone else, thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, listeners. I have an exciting announcement. I decided to launch a membership program for the show, where you have a chance to support me and the show directly. I love creating the show, and it means the world to me that you all tune in to keep hearing me week after week. But it takes an immense amount of time and energy to produce. I want to keep the show going, and I want to invest in its growth. And I also want you to become a partner with me in this journey. That's why I'm excited to give you a chance to officially become a supporter of the show at glow.fm/archispolly, ARCHISPOLLY, or by clicking the link in the show notes. It's quick and easy. It takes less than 30 seconds and just takes clicking a link in the show notes and using Apple or Google Pay. You don't have to create any new logins, and you can contribute as much or as little as you like. If this show is part of your day or week, and you like what I'm doing, then visit glow.fm/archispolly, all one word, and support me and the show in any way you can today.